Hey guys, this is Don McCauley. I'm the president and founder of Barbary Law Preview, and on behalf of, I'm wearing a different hat tonight. I'm wearing my, volunteer executive director hat for Pipeline to Practice for a webinar. I was trying to conjure up my old 1980s clash. Should I stay or should I go for the title of this webinar regarding transferring after your first year. To that end, we have some great speakers and great panelists. Hannah, you there?
I am here.
Cool. Why don't you introduce yourself and let us know what your billable rate is right now and what it's going to cost us to have you on this webinar with us. Now that you've been a partner.
Hi, my name is Hannah. My name is Hannah Shenwan. I am a partner at O'Melveny & Myers, and I transferred from Fordham to Columbia more than about 15 years ago-ish after my first year, and I look forward to chatting about my experience today.
Cool. Awesome. It looks like we've got 3 people online, as students, which is cool. For anybody who's here, most of the folks usually catch us on. Oh, actually, there's more now. A bunch just popped in. If you have any questions as we go through this process, please don't be shy. We'll pop up a Q&A box, and we'll try to answer them as we go along. But otherwise, I'll just guide the conversation. So, Nkonye and Alicia, are you there?
Yes. Hi.
Awesome.
Hi. Thanks for joining. My name is Nkonye Iwerebon, and I am the Dean of Admissions at Columbia Law School.
Alicia,
Good evening. My name is Alicia Miles, and I'm the Associate Director of Admissions at Villanova University Charles Widger School of Law.
Awesome. So, ladies, how's the applicant pool looking for this year? Are we looking at larger numbers, same numbers? How's it looking?
I guess I'll go.
Yeah.
Applications are looking robust, and we hope to have at least as many as last year, and hopefully even more. Transfer pool is different, and have no idea until we get closer to the summer.
Right. Cool. All right, guys. As I mentioned before, I'm Don McCauley. During the day, I serve as the president and founder of Barbary Law Preview, a law school prep course that many of you have taken as part of the Pipeline to Practice program. And then I moonlight. I volunteer as the executive director of Pipeline to Practice Foundation, which is a 501c3. That is committed to improving diversity in the legal profession. All right, so why don't we just jump into it and start talking about the transfer game. And Hannah, I know that you have some thoughts on this, but let's talk about having gone through it yourself. What's your take on the law school transfer game, as it is?
So, when I was a first year, I was one of these weird people who liked law school a lot. And I had this notion in my head that maybe someday I would become a law professor. So I looked around at all the sort of law professors that I knew and liked and respected, including at my own school, and I saw some things that they had in common. First, they all went to high-ranked law schools, high-ranked under the framework of U.S. News and World Report. Second, many of them had very fancy appellate clerkships. Third, many of them had spent time in the federal government, many of them in the Justice Department or other roles. Some of them also had appellate clerkships all the way up at the Supreme Court. And I came to the conclusion that while my school, Fordham, was an excellent school, it was regional and not what I thought at the time would get me to a fancy appellate clerkship, to a fancy Justice Department job, and eventually to a law professor gig. Now, I'm not entirely sure that's true or not, or whether I was correct or not, but I certainly thought that at the time. And so I decided that I was going to parlay my very strong grades into a spot at another school. And there was, I had some options because my grades were pretty good. And I got a lot of challenges at the time. Why would you even think about doing that? There was a sense of, you're sort of betraying the people you're leaving behind. You're kind of trading up. But I was very clear about what my goals were, and I didn't feel those that I was making a sort of a mistake in terms of leaving some of that behind. There was some concern that I wasn't going to have enough of a network among my professors in order to get a recommendation for my clerkship, but I was fortunate to be able to get recommendations after my second year. Some people said to me, well, don't you want to be a big fish in a small pond? To my response was, no, I want to be a big fish in a big pond. Thank you very much. And so I made the switch, and I had to make a decision fairly, quickly, because the application process happens during the summer after you get your second semester grades. And certainly that year there was a delay in my school's second semester grades being released. And so it really was, you've been accepted, and, OCI starts in 3 days. You have to make a decision.
Right.
So,
well, just to cut you off really quick, I wanted to tell you that your instincts were correct. In terms of, there was a study done a couple of years ago with respect to the law professors around the country. They looked at their pedigree and where they came from, and unsurprisingly, about 50% of the law professors came from 3 schools, and then the other 50% came from everywhere else. So you probably were, your instincts, as a first-year law student, were correct in terms of having a, one of the top tier schools and a launching pad to an appellate clerkship. Now looking back, and you probably had to give up. I mean, you probably were invited on by that time on the law review at Fordham,
sure,
and had to make a decision about that. How did that factor in your decision-making process?
So here are some of the things that I gave up. I gave up my spot on law review. I gave up a teaching assistant position. I gave up a spot on the moot court. Oh, no, wait, I didn't. I did not make moot court. My partner made it. So never mind about that. But I was giving up, and I gave up the sort of being at the top of the class feeling, the stature of being one of those people who had performed at the top of the class.
Right.
Yeah. The thing about the school, in terms of the job market, for people on law review, frankly, the job market opportunities were relatively similar in terms of the private sector. The difference is that if you were even a micro grade before, GPA point below the law review cutoff, you were, those job opportunities were thin on the ground. Whereas at the top schools, the schools the private firms tend to dig a little bit deeper, maybe a little less at my firm, but at the time, other firms do dig pretty deep into the class at the top schools. And looking back, I was giving up people that I knew. I was giving up the relationships with professors that I had made, and I was running a risk. I was running a risk that I wouldn't be a big fish in a big pond, that I would get rolled over. I was giving up, I had, I had a leadership role in a school organization. Other things, but I knew what my goals were, and I wanted to achieve them. And I did. I clerked on the Second Circuit for Sonia Sotomayor. I went from there through the honors program into the Justice Department and served in the government at the Civil Division for nearly 4 years. And, those opportunities were absolutely launched and fueled as a result of connections I made and relationships I made at Columbia. Now, candidly, I found the classwork a little easier at Columbia than I had at Fordham. No offense to the present company. I thought that there was, I'm sorry, but I didn't, but I was, and I did very well. I came in because I came in and I was ready to work very hard to show that I was meant to be there.
Right.
And I didn't give up my law review. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No. Just another indicator for, for at least for the listeners to sort of have that question of, okay, well, I made it here. Could I make it there? And then Konya and Alicia, please pipe in. But usually what I hear from most professors and most admissions officers is that the students who do come in as transfers actually do really, really well. Actually, end up performing towards the top end of the class simply because they have a little bit of that imposter syndrome, or I've got to prove myself. And they probably had to work really hard, to get there. And showing up your second year when most times, for almost everybody else, the game or the rush of 1L is over and sort of everybody's class rank after the first semester or first year has been set. You have a 2L who comes in with a bit of a chip on their shoulder to say, I've got to prove that I need to be here. Those students end up performing exceptionally well. And I could be, that's just anecdotal. And then Konya or Alicia, you might have better empirical evidence of that as well, or maybe not.
I suppose I would agree with that in part. I do think that the people who, I think it takes a particularly motivated person to choose the transfer and to go through the process for all the reasons that Hannah mentioned. And so if you are that motivated person, then that trait doesn't really get dropped at the door. And I think that you then take all of the energy and the momentum from your first year at law school, wherever you were, and bring it to that new school. Now, part of it could be that you want to prove to the world that you, in fact, belong. But part of it could be that you just have sort of self-selected as an incredibly motivated person, and you are bringing that to bear at the new institution. But I personally appreciate and love transfers for all that they bring to the institution, and I find them to be great contributors to the school as well. And anecdotally, I have heard the same from faculty who, and employers actually, on both the private and the public side, who encounter transfers that Columbia brings in.
Yeah, and I'll just add, when I say I did pretty well for the 2 years that I was at Columbia, I was awarded the Kent Scholarship at Columbia, which is I think the highest academic honor you can get, or one of the highest academic honors you can get. It's not easy to get that kind of grade, point average. The other thing that I would say is, in terms of giving up the law review accolade or credential, I was able to put on my resume when I went before employers, law review invited, parenthetically, to show that I had made law review in my prior school, which, got me most of the way there, frankly. And I was fortunate because I entered my a note I wrote into a writing competition held by the Columbia Law Review that they hold every year, and I had that note win the competition and was published. So I got to be in Law Review without having to actually do Law Review, which I think made my life much better.
Damn.
What else?
We have a heavy hitter on the phone tonight, guys. Jeez.
Well, you know, you make so, but in terms of thanks, Don. I mean, the thing that made I would say that there were really clear differences in the education when I arrived. In that a keynote speaker that might be held up as the important event of the semester that everyone would want to go to. At my former school, I felt like at Columbia, at every lunch, there were maybe 3 such speakers available, and it was just this shower of riches of incredible people marching through, who, you know, at that level, you know, the ambassador to Kenya and the human rights, you know, the most important human rights lawyer at The Hague, or, you know, this person talking about their role in the Justice Department, you know, doing X, Y, Z. You know, it was extraordinary, the notices that would go up for whatever talk was going to be there that day. And right now I'm actually coming full circle. I'm now a member of the adjunct faculty in Columbia. I teach a seminar, and, you know, I still see those notices up every day, every time I come in to teach. I did notice, I was lucky, though, about my choice of transferring. I was already in New York, which meant I had familiarity with the city. I had a pre-existing network. There are people who I know who, when they transferred, they went through a little period of dislocation and anxiety because of that. It wasn't just a school change, but an entire geographical change. But, you know, the same resilience and motivation that got them through the first year to such success, you know, definitely served them well. Definitely served them well when they arrived. But, you know, that was, you know, an emotional piece that some of them weren't prepared for. I could go on, but I feel like I'm hogging a lot of airtime.
Yeah,
So.
No, and let me, because it's an interesting point. Like, you know, when, you know, did you get any criticism from employers who, because I imagine when you went to interview, you know, for various jobs around the city, you know, for OCI, you probably interviewed with some Fordham attorneys. And were there any questions as to, like, hey, why'd you move 60 blocks uptown? Like, it was good enough for me. Why'd you leave? Rather than, like, I would think you'd have a better excuse to say I transferred in from out of state for my, you know, I don't know, my fictitious or whatever fiance, who I wanted to be closer to, who lives, you know, on the Upper West Side, rather than, you know, transferring 60 blocks, you know, north to Columbia. Did you get any kind of, you know, any kind of static back from employers about that, or no?
Maybe 1 or 2, but I don't necessarily think that really reflects well on them anyway.
Right.
Overwhelmingly, the majority was a sense of the people who transferred are the ones who are go-getters, and, you know, you're hungry. And those are the people and know how to work really hard and are going to be, you know, looking to make opportunities for themselves and others. And those are traits that are highly valued in private practice. So, and frankly, when I do interviewing, I definitely give a thumb on the scale to transfers, because having gone through it, I recognize, you know, rightly or wrongly, I perceive transfers as having a little extra gumption that will serve them well. Now, I will also say that in my second year at Columbia, so this would have been my third year, there was a new crop of transfers that came in, and one of them was a go-getter, but was also an obnoxious gunner in class, and everyone hated this person. So, be mindful of that chip on your shoulder and the, social dynamics. They still matter. I think there's ways of being audacious and being proactive without alienating all of your classmates who, you don't want to leave a bad taste in people's mouths. But, and unfortunately, that one person kind of, regardless of where you are, but that person, unfortunately, I feel like kind of contaminated the reputation of transfers for about a year and then, settled down.
Can I just say that, yes, indeed. Can I just say that, Columbia is getting a great deal of airtime, and I love it, but I think that all the things that Hannah just said about transferring to Columbia apply whether you're transferring to Columbia, Villanova, Fordham, wherever. I think that it's important to recognize that the decision to transfer is a really big one in many people's lives, and that really what's important is that wherever you decide to go is a place that you think will allow you to grow academically, intellectually, and that will allow you also to meet your professional aspirations. I mean, you could be transferring not simply because you think you have better opportunity, but maybe because the school that you're interested in actually has a stronger program in an area that you are much more interested in. So there are a number of reasons to transfer to particular institutions, and you just want to weigh all of the various considerations very carefully before you make that decision. And then, there will be some catching up to do just because, as Hannah mentioned, you're in a different environment. But it doesn't have to be, Columbia. Obviously, there are many incredible institutions that offer so much to all the students that are thinking about making this kind of transition.
Right. Now that actually makes perfect sense. And I would just say, just to echo that, the reason why you go to law school is, and obviously work hard during your first year is to have options. And, if transferring makes sense to improve your options, the options that you want professionally, then of course you do it. But then, I had an opportunity to transfer after my first year, and we'll get to that in a bit. And, I ultimately decided no. I stayed at Albany Law School because I was happy there. And I thought that the options that I would be presented with would be probably the same wherever I went for what I wanted to do. And it really wouldn't change my life. But Alicia, I'm sorry, I heard you coming in as well.
No, you're fine. To echo Hannah and Konye, know your reasons, why you're looking at transferring. Is it just, I think I might want to be at a different school? Or do you have a specific program in mind or a particular job market in mind? You can always complete a transfer application, but you can't transfer back. So right. Always be very clear about your reasoning and goals behind transferring, because I think once you make that jump, you're now there at that different school. So, there are going to be tons of people at the school that you are currently at or at the school that you're looking to transfer to, that are going to try and sway you one way or another. But as the student who's actually going to have to go through the process, it is important to be very clear and very firm in your goals and reasoning behind wanting to transfer to whatever school or program that you're looking at going to. But prior to that, obviously the audience here is already in law school, but to your friends that are, thinking, I'll just go to this school and transfer later, we want you to be happy for all 3 years on the off chance that you don't have the opportunity to transfer. So that's also something to think about when you're making those decisions.
Most definitely. I just want to, I'll just do a quick business case analysis, from a law school's perspective. You guys can tell me if I'm wrong or not. And then we'll jump into just the transfer process and things to really be cognizant of when you're deciding whether to do it, and then as you're in the midst of doing it. From a business case, transferring from a law school standpoint, for the transfer, I guess it would be the transferee school, or transferor school, I forget. The school that you're transferring to, I mean, they get, a lot of great, data on you. Maybe you didn't have the LSAT or the GPA from college to get into that school as a 1L, but those are really predictors of how well you'll do your first year of law school. And the overwhelming best predictor of how well you'll do in law school is how well you actually did in law school. So having an admissions officer have an opportunity to say, okay, this person has 1 year of law school under the belt. Let's take a look at how they did. That's really powerful evidence of whether you belong there or not. So that's one thing is from, again, you guys can tell me if I'm wrong or not. There's a certain level of comfort on this part of the admissions officer to have a transcript of somebody who's done really well. To also have letters of recommendation from the professors who, describe whether or not that person is fleeing the home institution because they were the jerk in class that Hannah mentioned before, or if they really were somebody who contributed a lot, to the classroom discussion, and they'll be sorry to see them go. So that's the front end predictor side. So like regardless of where you are right now, and whatever school you're thinking about possibly transferring to, recognizing that overwhelmingly your LSAT score and your undergraduate GPA are not going to weigh as heavily in the decision as actually how your first semester or first year transcript weighs. And then the second piece is from the transfer school that you're going to gets to pick up some really important metrics of their own. They get to, bar passage is based on, overwhelmingly the best predictor of how well somebody will do on the bar exam for the first time is how well they perform during their first year of law school, as well as employment. If you've done well enough to transfer to school X, most likely, you are going to find employment within the first, 10 months after graduation, which is another thing they have to report to the ABA and the U.S. News. So those are all metrics that the school gets to pick up on transfer students. So from a business case, it makes a lot of sense, to accept, a 2L transfer. There's a lot less risk involved in doing so. Now, that being said, if you guys want to, tell me I'm completely wrong, you wouldn't be the first people tonight to tell me, or first women in my life that would ever tell me that I was wrong. So I'm more than willing to listen to it, or we could just, launch into the transfer package as to what your guys are actually looking for when you're considering a transfer student, coming into either Columbia or to Villanova.
This is Hannah. I just want to add a couple other things that I would add to the business case for the school. One is the thing that I alluded to earlier, which is 2Ls come in and they're ready to work and often quite hungry, and the professors really like it because it's they have a section of the students who are very attuned. These are also students who are very attuned to brand and the brand of the school, and will go out and be tremendous brand ambassadors for the school that they transferred to. If you transfer to, to Duke or to NYU or to Villanova or wherever you go to, you're going to be very proud of that brand, and you're going to want to go out and celebrate it out in the community, and that will serve the school well over many years. Also, I'm not sure, I may be speaking a little out of turn on this one, but it's my understanding that many of the U.S. News and World Report rankings are driven, the data are driven by first-year admissions. So, the statistics about GPA and LSAT, they're not going to damage the school's standing if you come in as a second year. And another piece of the puzzle, which is extremely important for everyone to be thinking about if they're thinking about transferring, is the money. There are almost no scholarships for transfers. So you will you would be responsible for likely full freight payments. And that is, I may be speaking in an overgeneralization. There may be schools where some scholarships are available, but it's my understanding that it is rare. And as a result, that is, so the school gets hungry, excited people about the brand who will pay full tuition and will be very excited to be there. So the schools definitely get quite a bit from accepting transfers.
I would agree with all that. All right, so Konya and Alicia, let's put you guys on the spot now. When you go to pick up a transfer applicant file, what's the first thing you look at? Like, what's the go-to thing, the thing that you're like, I can't wait to see what this thing says? Assuming that the numbers are there, the transcript, the transcript from the first year, the person has the numbers to go.
I would say that the personal statement and the recommendation letters, looking for, and then of course the resume. So pretty much all the components, all the other components of the application. In the personal statement, I have a higher expectation that they have a better sense of what law school is about and better sense of what their interests might be. Because, sometimes the personal statement for the entering 1L class is maybe thoughts are not as crystallized. People think they want to do one thing, which is fine, but they don't really have substantiated reasons for why they want to do those things. And again, that's fine. But after you spent your first year in law school, I think we expect that you can talk a little more intelligently about the whole enterprise. And so, looking for a clear explanation of the reasons behind transferring in the personal statement. Resume will tell us about how engaged you are as a student, as a person, and to some extent the things about which you are most passionate. And there will be a thread that's drawn throughout your application, from the resume to the personal statement and a description of extracurricular activities or even co-curricular activities while in law school. And we don't expect you to forget everything that you did before, so that will be included in the resume. And then importantly is the recommendation letters from faculty who are able to compare you to other students in their class. In addition to us seeing the grade that you earned in a particular class or in all the classes in your first year, it's an important voice and an important piece to add to the overall equation of considering your transfer application. So I'm trying to think of if there's anything else that I would focus on. Those would be the big ones for me.
Just, do you guys, for the transfer applicant, is there like a universal transfer application, or is the personal statement the same for each school, or how is it, or do you guys come up with a new question or a new prompt every year, or is it the same one that's just get recycled?
So I think the personal statement question for, a fresh applicant or even a transfer applicant is typically going to be set by the school. I've seen some schools where they leave the personal statement prompt open-ended and use that as an opportunity to see what the student is choosing to talk about in the application and how they're choosing to bring all of that together. And then I've also seen personal statement prompts where they're asking very specific and pointed questions, partially to get very specific and pointed answers to those questions, but also to see if the applicant is actually reading and digesting and then answering those questions properly.
Right. Okay. Well, that's fair enough. So it's going to be determinative by where you're applying to, essentially.
Yes. I would caution transfer applicants to thoroughly read the transfer application. A lot of pieces of that application are going to look very similar. to your entering 1L application, but there may be some additional transfer-specific questions or transfer-specific writing samples or personal statement prompts or anything like that that the school is looking for. And realistically, reviewing a transfer application, we're expecting a better product because you have been in law school for a year. You've already been kind of through the system a bit. Your writing should be a little bit better. We're looking at all these things with, a keener eye, so to speak, because, we're holding you to a higher expectation. So I would always caution transfer applicants to not throw it away and not be solely relying on the grades and just like, oh, well, I have the grades, they're going to take me. You still have to do a little bit of work. You still have to write, cohesive statement. You still have to get those letters of recommendation. And for me personally, when I'm reviewing a transfer application, I'm going straight to that letter of recommendation from your current law professor. Because at that point, I know, the numbers are there. We've checked that box, but I'm looking to see what that professor is saying in terms of you being a student and, being in the culture of the school that you have come from. So that's, obviously we're looking at all parts of the application and, they will all be reviewed in turn, but the first thing that I'm reading in a transfer application is that letter of recommendation from a current law professor.
Interesting. So now I'm thinking that I probably wouldn't, well, actually I would have been a good transfer, applicant in terms of, I was always engaged in class. So I think my professors would have stepped up to me. And, at least, if they didn't want to get rid of me because I talked so much, they would at least say that he contributed to the classroom discussion. But from what Konya said, I was one of those kids who devoted everything to my first year of law school to the exclusion of almost everything else. So my resume would have seemed a bit bare as, to student groups and other organizations on campus that I would probably not be all that involved in. So, I guess, from what I'm hearing right now is you really want to make sure, A, that you're at least appearing to be a well-rounded student. Is that fair? You don't have to be the president of the, animal rights group on campus or the intellectual law society, but, you might want to just be a member. So it appears on your resume that you were involved. As well as you don't want to be, that shrinking violet in the back of the room who doesn't talk and, even though they got straight A's, the professor has no idea who they are. You sort of want to make sure that you're building a good rapport with the folks who are ultimately going to be, acting as your sponsor, essentially. Is that what I'm hearing?
A little bit. I believe that people should bring their authentic selves to the application. So if something is not important to you, I don't believe you should do things because you think it looks good on the resume. But that's me as the reviewer. Maybe the advice is different for those who are helping people put up, who look at applications for other reasons. But so yes, I think those are signals to us as to how engaged an individual you are, and we want to bring people who are very much interested in the things around them, in the communities that they are surrounded by in one form or another. And it could be academic. It may not have to be extracurricular per se, but it could be co-curricular in some form. So I would say that you certainly want your resume to have heft to it. That is true for people that we bring in to the 1L class, so it should be true for those who also come as transfers. In terms of faculty recommendations, yes, it would be best if the person who is writing a letter knows who you are and can say something meaningful about you that distinguishes you from, the next person that was in the classroom. Otherwise, it does seem very hollow, right? If all they're saying is that this person got whatever the grade is in my class, and I don't know how helpful that is to advance your case. So I would say hopefully that because you're this motivated person, you probably are doing other things, even though, Dawn, you say you weren't involved in all these other, extracurricular things. Maybe you were doing some research or something because you were very much interested in the academics.
I was playing a lot of wiffle ball. So I don't know how much you guys value that in Columbia. Well, all right. But that. I could have been, I had a very mean underhanded pitch. So but no, but I from what I just remember that was my big stress reliever, was working out and running and then trying to devote myself to to make sure that I was in a position that I would have the options that I wanted to have after the end of at the end of 1 hour.
I'll just sorry, Don, if I could just pipe in for a second. I just want to flag that what Kanya just said about recommendations, that is not just true for the transfer application. That is going to be true for any job you apply for where you're relying on academic recommendations. The notion of competitive comparisons, having a professor who knows you, as more than someone who just got a good grade or, occasionally spoke in class. This is why you need to develop relationships with your professors beyond just being a good student. So, be mindful that it's not just for the transfer application that you will want that kind of praise in a letter.
And it also goes to, really what you're paying for, right? Regardless of what law school you're going to, part of what you're paying for, the education is one thing, right? But part of what you're paying for is an access to a network. And, the controllers of much of that network are your professors. So you would be silly not to. I'm constantly telling my kids, who don't listen to me anyway, but that the world doesn't reward passive people. Like, you have to put yourself out there. Like, even lottery winners have to get off the couch and buy a ticket, right? So, like, if you're at law school and you are engaged in one of your classes and you find one area of the law particularly stimulating, make time to go and visit in office hours, or ask pointed questions after class. That things that that are of interest to you, because again, tapping into those folks' network, I think that part of your net worth is always going to be that network that you form. And Hannah, like you said, I mean, like, it doesn't just have to be about the transfer application. It's like when you went to go and apply for a clerkship on the Second Circuit, they're looking for what your professors have to say. Ideally, like, probably the former clerk for Sotomayor was somebody that said, oh, you should go and talk to her. So you definitely want to tap into that network, regardless of whether you transfer or not. Can I ask, the Anconia and Alicia, how do you guys handle law review now? Like, when more and more schools are offering opportunities for transfer students to write on to the law review and or a journal. How does it work at your schools, at Villanova and at Columbia? Let's start out with Alicia at Villanova.
We do have an opportunity for our transfer students to write on. So transferring into Villanova, you would not miss that opportunity.
That's awesome.
The same is true for us. There's a special process for transfer students. It does happen sometime after the regular process, because the regular process occurs right after finals, a week after finals for the first years. And so there's a special process just before the transfer applications, just before the transfer application deadline. And the law review reserves a couple of spots for transfers. We also have a special process for the other journals. So if you don't make it onto law review and you're interested in one of the other journals, then there's always the opportunity to do that as well.
Right. That actually.
This is Hannah.
You know,
I have a.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, okay.
I have a question about that I've always wondered about, which is, do you look at if the student applied to your school to get in first year, and maybe they were either rejected or waitlisted, do you keep that application and look at it again in the context of the transfer process?
So in the context of the, the application is there, and we certainly can view it, but it doesn't really have that much bearing unless there's something in there that's just really bad. But as I think Dawn started out saying earlier, or maybe it was you, Hannah, that we don't really care so much about what happened before. We don't care as much about what happened before, because your first year is the big indicator of how well you might do in the years to come, right? You've been at law school, you've been under the pressure of the first year, you have succeeded with all of that, and now you're applying to move on with your academic career. And so we look at all of that, even though we don't forget your history, but we take all of those things, we look at all of those things, but I don't think that it weighs as much as it did previously, obviously.
Did just in terms of timing, and I know that you can't speak for all schools, but generally speaking, like, just to give our listeners a little idea as to, they might be sitting on a really strong first semester transcript right now. They're deciding whether they want to parlay that into maybe a possible transfer. What's the timing for you guys, and then when are decisions usually made? So when are applications usually due, and then ultimately when are you guys finally pulling the trigger and inviting folks to transfer in?
We at Columbia, the deadline for applications is July 15th. We start accepting applications, or the application is available May 1, but few, if any, applications will be complete until sometime in mid to late June, and that's because first year grades will not, or second semester grades are not in for the most part. And so, so even though the application is available, we don't expect to see a complete application until much later. Now the deadline again is July 15th for us, but we'll start sending out decisions soon after we have a critical mass of applications. It used to be that we would start sending them out right before the deadline in July, but now we're trying to do that even sooner and get them out if we can, maybe by the end of, some of them by the end of June. But we continue to read all the applications, and we read them all the way up to the third week of July probably, or maybe even the end of July. The key factor for us is that a lot of people who are applying to transfer are interested in the private sector. And so it's very important that we get them in the process so that they can participate in on-campus or early interviewing for the private sector jobs. There's also a process for those who are interested in the public sector, but it's not as pressing. So we're just trying to get them into the system and also help them assimilate a little more easily into Columbia. So the sooner you can complete your application, the sooner we can get a decision, and the sooner we get a decision, the easier it is for you to just sort of get into the overall network of things that you need to get done in order to start your second year as a regular student, basically.
I would
Is that the same
echo a
timeline for
lot.
you, Alicia? Yeah.
So, somewhat. So our transfer application goes live on lsac.org in the spring semester. So we have a deadline for the application receipt and the application completion. So you can access that application, look at it, go back and forth with it, but we have to have it completed in our office by July 15th. And the e-app portion of your transfer application has to be at least submitted by July 1st. So as you're, kind of getting all of that material together, obviously we're requiring that full first year transcript. So we're also requiring a letter of good standing. So you're obviously going to need that from your home institution, certification that you've completed all of the 1L curriculum from your home institution. And we are making those transfer decisions on a rolling basis. But again, to echo what Nkonye said before, the quicker you kind of get that ball rolling and get that application in our hands, the quicker we can make a decision and kind of integrate you into the Villanova Law community and get you kind of rolling in the various things that I'm sure every transfer student is going to want to participate in. So that's going to be your OCIs, your journals, and your moot court, mock trial, that type of thing.
Cool.
Yeah, and as I said, I was my school that year. There was real delays in the grade release, and I think I got my decision on like a Friday, and by the following Wednesday I was at OCI or something preposterous like that. So it can happen. Well, anyway, yeah, their schools will vary and timing will vary.
So now the last piece, and this is sort of, we're seeing a lot of students who take law preview and who throw their hat in the ring for a transfer if they ultimately don't decide to transfer. Some of them are using that letter that they received from a particular other school to negotiate a better scholarship for themselves. Maybe they were, admitted off the wait list and they weren't given any scholarship money the first time around. But, their home institution, might feel like, they would be losing out on some of those great metrics if that student left, whether it's their bar passage or whether it's their employability. And some schools are stepping up. Do you guys have any advice on that? I mean, I understand it's sensitive. You may not even want to talk about that. But, I do know that some schools will actively say, look, if you want to try to negotiate with a transfer letter, then go to the other transfer school. We don't want to talk to you. And there's a couple schools out there that I know that they handle that pretty well, or they're pretty firm about that. But, how is that received on the other end from the admissions office or the financial aid office when somebody says, hey, I really want to stay here, but I have another opportunity. Is there anything that you can do to make my time here a little bit more worthwhile or affordable? How is that received by the school?
I've noticed that while every school generally handles that conversation a little bit differently, the tone and tenor of that conversation is typically going to be set on how the student approaches the admissions and or financial aid office, whoever it would be that's making that decision. I think it's, on the school's perspective, it's a little bit easier and more palatable to have that conversation with a student who, has been doing well at the school there so far and is actually contributing to the culture and community of the school. And when they're approaching this conversation, they're approaching it in a very professional, business-like manner. But I think it's very difficult to have that conversation with a student, who has been less engaged, less willing to interact with the faculty, and kind of approaches it as the school wants me, give me more, or else I'm leaving. So I think
that sense of entitlement that that's not palatable to anybody. I would
Right.
imagine it's a very difficult conversation and a very, it can be navigated, but it has to be navigated in a way. Otherwise, you become the jerk that, that Hannah described before, who was like, yeah, go to the other school. We don't want you here anyway. The jerk
Yeah.
the next year that they're all talking about,
And I'd always encourage the student to maybe send a pre-email. Hey, Office of Financial Aid, I, would really like to discuss my scholarship financial aid award packet as I am looking at transfer options. That way, the person that you're going in to have that conversation with can already begin to pull whatever materials they need to pull to be able to make that decision. Because why go in to have this conversation and they're like, oh, I can't really tell you a ton. I need to go look at this, or I need to talk to this person or do X, Y, Z. So, giving whatever office is appropriate at your home institution a heads up that you'd like to have this conversation so that they can be prepared. And then also the student coming in with a generalized game plan and an idea of, okay, a cost breakdown of the school that you're looking to transfer to, a cost breakdown of the school that you're currently at, your current scholarship, package, your current school's bar passage, your current school's OCI, all the things that you're interested in at the school that you are looking to transfer to, school or schools, and your home institution will really bolster your case. Because just going in and saying, oh, this other school is willing to give me more money, but I'm already here and I'd like to stay, that doesn't really make for an enticing conversation.
Right. Or
if I can just,
they're not even giving money. But go ahead. I'm sorry, Konya.
Oh, that was
no.
Okay, sorry.
It was me. Yeah, I just want to make the observation that as lawyers, which is why you're going to law school, whether you're a litigator or on the transactional side of things, public, private, you will have to be negotiating for the rest of your career. And this is a high stakes, but almost low stakes opportunity for you to practice something extremely important, which is negotiating and going in prepared, going in with the right tone so that you don't alienate your counterparty. And what is the worst thing that can happen? The worst thing that can happen is that they say, no, we're not going to change the package. And then you will be back with your opportunity to pick decision between what you already have, which is the school you're at, where you've done all very well, or the school you're going to, which creates additional opportunities if that's the right fit for you. The only, on the other hand, the upside of going through this negotiation is you could increase the value of the home institution. But there is, as far as I can tell, no downside, and you gain tremendous experience. And the thing about asking for something hard is it teaches you how to do it for the next time you have to ask for something hard, like a raise, like a promotion, like, your client not to go to jail. These are important skills, and this is a great way to give it a try.
What a great answer. Those are, it's a tough question, and it's a tough thing to navigate, especially if you're, a younger student, dealing with a dean of the law school or assistant dean of the law school, going to them and asking for, for money, essentially, is a tough thing to do in any respect. So as long as you're doing it respectfully, and as long as you said, Hannah, it just prepares you for the next time. It makes it a little bit easier. To go. I've kept you guys exactly 1 hour now. And I just wanted, I'm happy to end it on that, but do we have any closing remarks, anything that we missed? And Konya, Alicia, Hannah, do you think we missed or didn't, cover all the stones here or flip over all the stones?
I think we touched on pretty much everything. It's not an easy decision to make. I wish everyone the best of luck, and also feel free to, reach out and ask questions of the school that you're interested in transferring to ensure that it will be the right place for you once the decision arrives that notifies you of acceptance. So.
Cool. Cool. All right, guys, thank you so much for spending your Valentine's Day with me.
Happy Valentine's Day.
You wished it was Happy Valentine's Day. I'm sure you wish you had something else to do. Guys, I really appreciate you volunteering your time and answering these really important questions. And hopefully our listeners got a lot out of it. So have a great rest of your evening. I'll let you go right now, but thank you again for contributing your time to this webinar.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Bye, guys.